Hi, I'm Hal Roberts. This is Bridge City News. Here's some of the top stories we've been following. Conservative leader Pierre Poilievre visited Calgary and talked about how more needs to be done to keep Canadians safe at bus shelters and in the downtown cores. The Canadian Taxpayers Federation has launched a legal challenge to find out who stayed at the $6,000 a night hotel during the Queen's funeral in London. And a special agriculture conference and trade show is taking place here in the Windy City. We have the details.
Your nation, your province, your southern Alberta. From the heart of Lethbridge, it's Bridge City News with Hal Roberts.
Thanks so much for joining us. The Alberta government is going to boost policing in downtown Calgary by deploying 12 sheriffs to work with city police. Public Safety Minister Mike Ellis says the goal is to try and deter social disorder and criminal behavior. He says no one should feel scared or afraid to go out at night or to ride public transit.
The aim of this pilot project is to enhance CPS's ability to provide a visible presence with the addition of Alberta sheriffs while also responding to community concerns and getting help for people who need it. At its most basic, these kind of patrols can mean that there's a faster response when there's an urgent call nearby. Whether this call is a distress in an overdose, an act of social disorder or criminal activity, having patrols actively patrolling with more boots on the ground helps to ensure that the appropriate response happens in a timely fashion.
The 3-month pilot project, which begins February 27th and runs until the end of May, is similar to the one already announced for downtown Edmonton. Federal Conservative leader Pierre Poilievre was in Calgary on Wednesday discussing the Alberta government's plan to bring in sheriffs to patrol the streets and bus shelters. Poilievre says more needs to be done to protect people in cities, which he says are simply coming apart.
This is a problem from coast to coast. So we can't blame a local police force, municipal government, or even province. It's just as bad, if not worse, in Vancouver, Montreal, and Toronto. Obviously, the problem is national in nature, and it has happened after 8 years of Justin Trudeau. Why is it happening? One, people are falling into poverty. You got a fifth of people are cutting their groceries, or they're cutting their meals because they can't afford to eat. And so then they're ending desperate and on the streets and addicted to drugs. And that's because of the inflationary policies Trudeau's implemented that have driven up the cost of everything. Two, he's implemented a catch and release policy that allow the most prolific repeat violent offenders to go back onto the street again and again and again.
The Alberta government announced that it is investing more money to improve detox and pre-treatment capacity in Calgary. The province will be investing more than $4 million into the Calgary Drop-In Centre to create new overdose response teams. Officials say the extra funding will also create 35 medical detox and pre-treatment beds capable of supporting 1,000 Calgarians each and every year.
As a housing-focused emergency shelter, we're always looking for innovative ways to create pathways out of homelessness and into recovery and housing. The ability to offer detox, transition beds, and dynamic overdose response at the DI will just be one more piece in creating those pathways, especially for those experiencing mental health and addiction challenges. We want to build on the success of our current programs and supports that allowed us to successfully house over 500 individuals in 2022. That is a big result of our partnership with the Calgary Homeless Foundation and other community partners that make that work possible. We know there's a lot more work to do as we continue to see that mental health and addictions create further barriers to ending a person's experience of homelessness.
A Medicine Hat Alberta senior who applied for MAID, also known as Medical Assistance in Dying, has had his application denied. 65-year-old Les Landry, who applied for MAID last year after having his disability benefits cut off, has been very public online about his struggles with poverty. The executive director for Euthanasia Prevention Coalition, Alex Schadenberg, believes Landry's application was declined because he was so public about his case on social media.
He made it quite clear that it had a lot to do with poverty. So I think that's probably why he was denied. But the fact is that there's nothing in the law that says once you've been denied once or twice that you still can't have medical aid in dying. The law only requires one doctor to assess you and to agree, and a second doctor to agree with the first doctor or nurse. and their assessment. So it's still possible that he might get approved. I'm not saying he should be. I'm just saying it's still possible he might get approved.
Now, in a separate incident involving Landry, he was charged with 1 count of kidnapping following an alleged incident involving a housekeeper last month. He's scheduled to appear in court on February the 28th. Well, it's good to see more sunshine earlier today in southwestern Alberta, and not a bad temperature for this time of year. Jeanette Rocher is now with a quick peek at the weather forecast. Jeanette, the mild temperature should continue for the rest of the week before the snow returns?
Hal, it's easy to forget that it's still winter here in Chinook territory because we've had such beautiful, decent temperatures. And yeah, you're right, though. The snow is going to return and it will happen next week. But before then, we're going to see some higher than seasonal averages for the latter part of this week and into the weekend as well. Overnight low this evening, -4. That's going to be coupled with a 40-kilometer-per-hour wind. With the wind chill, it's going to feel like -10, going to feel like -9 in the morning when we get up. But then Thursday's high is going to be up to 3 degrees. Partly cloudy skies. We're going to see a wind up to 60 kilometers per hour. It's going to be a windy one. After that, we're going to see much milder temperatures as we head into the weekend. And then it's going to get colder and snowier. And I will be back later in the show to give you all those details.
Great. Thanks so much, Jeanette. The Canadian Taxpayers Federation is demanding answers. The group is launching a legal challenge with the Information Commissioner to force the Trudeau government to disclose who stayed at the $6,000 per night hotel room in London during the Queen's funeral. Now, to talk about this in more detail is the federal director of the CTF, Franco Terrazzano, who joins us once again from Ottawa. Franco, didn't the CTF already file an access to information request? How did that go?
Well, we did, and it didn't go as well as we would have wanted it. All we want the government to do is be honest with taxpayers, okay? This is an important matter of principle. Taxpayers foot the bill. We deserve to know who wasted our money in the $6,000 per night hotel room. So we filed a simple access to information request. Just tell us who stayed in the room. Well, we got a response back from the government, but it was redacted. They wrote down the name, then they blacked it out. So that's unacceptable. If they're going to waste their money like this, they better be transparent and come clean on who stayed in that room.
Now, a lawyer representing your group has filed an official complaint with the Office of the Information Commissioner, the body responsible for investigating complaints and resolving disputes related to the federal access to information system. Franco, will the complaint really do anything, or will the Trudeau Liberals just kind of brush it off?
We are ready to stay in this fight for as long as it takes. And let me tell you why. Because governments all the time try to bend the rules and withhold information from taxpayers. And we're not going to let that happen. Not this time, okay? Now, let me tell you something. The access to information request that we got back, the redacted one, the bureaucrats cited section 16 and 19 for the reasons of the redactions, okay? That's for security and personal information rationales. But that doesn't pass the sniff test. For starters, the law is very clear that these types of expenses are not personal information exemptions. But also, let's look at the security claim. Well, hold on a second. The Queen's funeral happened 5 months ago. So unless the government is worried that the Terminator is going to travel back in time, we can safely disclose who it was who stayed in that $6,000 per night hotel suite.
Thanks so much, Franco. That was Franco Terrazzano, Federal Director of the Canadian Taxpayers Federation, joining us from Ottawa. Political reporter Brian Lilly says it's really important for top government officials to attend events like the Queen's funeral, but not at $6,000 a night.
They have to go to these events. Nobody's saying they don't, but a $6,000 a night, 3-bedroom suite with butler, just for the Prime Minister, that makes no sense at all. You could have stayed in all kinds of beautiful hotel suites for far less than what the Prime Minister paid for that one. And I'm assuming, even though they won't tell us, I am assuming that it is the Prime Minister, because that's the only place that hasn't answered clearly on were they there.
Make sure you catch the full interview with the always colorful Brian Lilly coming up in the second half of our program. Over 200 farmers and agriculture experts made their way to the Sandman Signature Lethbridge Lodge on Wednesday for the Farming Smarter Conference and Trade Show. The annual event highlights speakers from across Canada to talk about their experience in the ag industry. As BCN's Micah Quinn explains now, a local podcaster who spoke at the event chatted about the increase of women getting into farming.
I would say for myself personally, not growing up in agriculture, I didn't think that women were farmers, and that was something that I was just uneducated about.
Caitlin Dubin is a first-generation farmer who works with her husband on a certified organic, grain, oilseed, and pulse farm just north of Lethbridge. In 2019, Dubin started the Rural Women podcast to celebrate the stories of women in agriculture.
It's been heard worldwide, been downloaded over 500,000 times, and it's been a great pleasure to share the stories of women in agriculture.
According to Stats Canada, in 2021, 30.4% of Canada's farm operators were female, which is up from 28.7% in 2016.
I think there's always been women in farming and women farmers, but they are building the courage to call themselves farmers now and stepping out of the shadows and being front and center in their farms. And there's more and more young people going into agriculture for so many different reasons, whether it's environmental or they're just looking to grow their own food or whatever it is.
Ken Coles, the executive director of Farming Smarter, told us the annual conference and trade show is a great way to showcase the important work that the organization does right here in Lethbridge.
I hope that our policymakers and our funders will recognize the value and impact of what we do, because we've been challenged with support. So I hope that everybody can help pass the word on. They can hear it from me, but it's a lot better to hear it from all of you if you see value in what we do.
The top minds in agriculture will also be at the Farming Smarter conference and trade show on Thursday. For Bridge City News, I'm Micah Quinn.
A number of Lethbridge business owners expressed their frustration during an Economic Standing Policy Committee meeting on Wednesday afternoon about the potential of parking fines being increased. Now, the fee for parking fine currently sits at $25, and it's looking at being pumped up to $50. The owner of Catwalk Salon says his biggest frustration is not being able to plug the meter for his clients while they're at his business.
When you leave with a pedicure from Catwalk, you leave in a flip-flop made of sponge. It doesn't last very far. You cannot go down to the 10-hour meter, if there is one. Please don't raise the meter price. The number one thing, I don't mind if you raise it to $15 and $30 fine after a week, but allow us to plug it for the time we need. Why do we want to limit people to shop downtown? We don't limit how long you can spend in Costco, go to the liquor store, get the gas, Walmart, you can go to Chatters, you can go to the Gap outlet. We don't limit that time. Why are we limiting the time? I want my clients to get their hair done and then head over to Owl, have a drink, and then pick up their ring over at Foster's.
Lisa Tompkins of Tompkins Jewelers says raising the fines for parking will have a serious negative impact on her clients.
When a ticket's $10, I don't mind paying it for my client, and if it goes up, I'll have to eat that as well. But I do think about the smaller businesses downtown that have curated these beautiful stores, and maybe their average sales $100. I'm not sure because I don't know what it is, but when I go and shop downtown, in the last couple of weeks, my average purchase was about $100. So if I get a $35 ticket, I'm not coming back, right?
Tompkins hopes all of the issues presented at council will spark a conversation and that parking fines will not be increased. Mixed martial arts is not a sport for the faint at heart. With Valentine's Day behind us now, it means mixed martial arts fighters are now putting their heart back into their craft and training. A live MMA event is taking place this weekend in Lethbridge, which is raising funds for a great cause. BCN's Naveen Day has those details.
An amateur mixed martial arts event is set to take place on Saturday, February 18th. Rumble in the Cage 64 plans to give spectators some knockout action at Exhibition Park. And according to promoter Lee Meehan, the event is in support of a charitable cause.
Rumble in the Cage is the longest running MMA show in Canada, and this coming up Saturday is Rumble in the Cage 64. Great event we always host here in Lethbridge. We generally try and raise money for local charities, and this event we're working with Green and Yellow Group. And it's important for me as to give back to the fighters and help them reach their goals, but also help out our community that we live in and make everything better here in Lethbridge.
President of the Green and Yellow Group, Michael Gervais, says the partnership with Rumble in the Cage events has helped get his charity and projects off the ground.
Our vision, number one, is to help bring unity in the community. In doing so, we provide a bunch of initiatives throughout the community, and to kind of tie in with what Lee was mentioning, two of our main initiatives that we work with are the homeless. It's called Got Your Back. And then we also work with the kids' bicycles in the springtime, where we provide 50 brand new bicycles to a bunch of kids around town, along with a ton of other initiatives throughout the year.
And according to Meehan, there will not be any shortage of action.
Every weekend, whenever we have a Rumble in the Cage, exciting action from start to finish. Doors open at 6 o'clock, fights start at 7 sharp, so you don't want to miss it because they always start banging. We've got lots of amateur guys coming up. They're exciting fights. I'm in the main event. I guarantee a knockout in the first round. You don't want to miss this action.
For Bridge City News, I'm Naveen Day.
Following the recent meeting in Ottawa between the premiers and the Prime Minister, Manitoba's Heather Stephenson says new federal health money this fiscal year will be too small to make much of a difference. The province is expected to receive an additional $194 million in 2023-2024. Stephenson says her government will direct the funding towards surgical and diagnostic backlogs, long-term care, health care, and mental health and addiction services. She'll be sitting down with Federal Health Minister Jean-Yves Duclos before the end of the week to negotiate bilateral funding agreements, which is separate and a separate funding stream. Ontario Premier Doug Ford says if Toronto Mayor John Tory follows through with his resignation and a left-wing mayor gets elected, it would be a disaster. The 68-year-old Tory dropped his bombshell resignation announcement Friday after admitting he had an inappropriate relationship with a former staffer.
Mayor Tory has been a phenomenal partner. He's been a really good mayor for the city of Toronto, and just in my opinion, it's not time to change. Everything's going tickety-boo in Toronto, working well with the federal and provincial government, and what happens in their private life is strictly up to the mayor and their family. I think everyone has seen the good job that Mayor Tory has done. So is he the best thing that we have in Toronto? Yes, he is the best thing. And let's not upset the apple cart for a personal issue he's dealing with. He's a really, really good mayor, and let's move forward.
You know, getting in shape is often a New Year's resolution for many of us, but as personal trainer Gavin Johnson shares, the benefits of an exercise regime far outweighs the physique. Now, according to Johnson, an exercise routine will impact every aspect of your life.
Simply getting into the door and increasing that mental health by just lifting weight is huge. Another thing is if naturally you're kind of aggressive, getting in here and moving things around and taking it out in this place to move on to the rest of your life is huge. It's like taking a weight off your shoulder. And I see it time and time and time again that it has a direct correlation to the rest of your life. Business starts to succeed more. You start to have a better relationship with your significant other. You want to play with your kids. You want to move around with the grandkids. Anything like that. Like there's so much more than just coming here and working out. Like you said, that mental well-being is huge.
Be sure you catch the full interview with personal trainer Gavin Johnson and BCM producer Michael Clausen coming up after Business News. Well, we had kind of a mixed bag earlier today weather-wise, but the good news is that things will be warming up fairly soon. Complete weather details are on deck. Well, we had some of those gusty winds again today here in the very windy city. Jeanette Rocher is in now with all of the weather details. Jeanette, it appears as though those may be those Chinook winds bringing us slightly warmer temperatures for southwestern Alberta.
Yeah, I think you could be right about that, Hal, because it is going to get much warmer before it gets much colder, that is, and that's going to be when the snow starts as well. But until then, we are looking at a high of 3 degrees on Thursday, up to 4 on Friday with mainly clear skies. 5 degrees on Saturday. Should be a pretty decent weekend for us. 8 degrees is the high on Sunday. And then there we go. We're starting again with the snow. 60% chance of flurries expected on Monday. -5 the high. -13 the high for Tuesday. And with a 60% chance of snow. So there you go. It's going to start to look like winter again by next week. Here we thought it was done. Okay, average high for this time of year, 2 degrees. Average low, -11, 14. That was our high temperature on this day back in 1990. And in 1979, we had our chilliest, which was -32 degrees. Sun rose this morning at 7:42, and our sunset this evening at 5:49 p.m. We're now looking at 10 hours and 7 minutes of daylight. It's happening fast. Okay, on the west coast, we are looking at a 30% chance of showers in Victoria, high of 6 degrees. Same thing for Vancouver. 6 the high and a 30% chance of showers. 3 degrees the high in Edmonton with a mix of sun and cloud, and partly cloudy skies expected tomorrow as well in Calgary with a high of 5 degrees. Both of those Alberta cities looking at 20 to 40 kilometer per hour winds as well. Okay, in Saskatoon, we're looking at a mix of sun and cloud. -5 the high, -8 the high in Regina, and a high of -15 in Winnipeg with clear skies. Now, here's the thing. Those 3 cities looking at a risk of frostbite because the wind chill is going to be crazy. It's going to look like -33, -35, and -36 in the morning. That's the prairies. Okay, let's talk about central Canada now. We're looking at showers, 6 degrees the high in Toronto, 3 the high in Ottawa, clearing skies in Montreal with a high of 4 degrees. Not too bad at all, I would say. As we look to the Maritimes, Fredericton we're going to see a high of 10 degrees there with a mix of sun and cloud. Halifax clearing, looking at some fog patches in the morning, which will be dissipating. 12 degrees the high there. Charlottetown looking at some showers, 7 degrees the high there. 1 degree the high in St. John's, Newfoundland, as they have now ended that winter storm, but they are still looking at some flurries and some showers beginning tomorrow afternoon. So there you have it. That is your forecast.
Today's weather report is brought to you by Bridge Utilities, providing competitive rates for electricity, natural gas, and internet, while investing back in communities across southern Alberta.
Around 10,000 hogs died in a barn fire on Sunday at a farm in the Sturgis area, located north of Yorkton, Saskatchewan. Fire officials say the blaze took place at a finishing barn, which housed pigs of all ages. All employees inside were able to safely exit the building. Fire investigators and insurance representatives are currently investigating. The president of fertilizer giant Nutrien says the Russian invasion of Ukraine has put the spotlight on Saskatchewan and its resources. The ongoing war has caused disruptions in the agriculture and fertilizer sectors. Ukraine is a leader in wheat and oilseed exports, and Russia is a major exporter of fertilizer. Ken Seitz says the Saskatoon-based company is working to help fill the gap. You know, in 7 years since leaving the online marketplace he founded, Craigslist, Craig Newmark has embarked on another new adventure, this time giving away millions of dollars to charitable causes.
Once you make enough money to be comfortable and to maybe help some other folks out, like a family, then what's the point in keeping around more money? So with Craigslist, that manifested in a minimal monetization model. I've contributed some substantial money to a lot of the stuff I believe in. One of the biggest areas has to do with trustworthy journalism, related ethics, journalist protection, stuff like that, and that's been maybe a couple $100 million. I'm making substantial contributions to CUNY, specifically the journalism school. The journalism school is about getting people of all sorts to represent what they're about, to be fair in the news. The news needs to talk about everyone, and usually best by people who represent one group or another. This is my clumsy way of saying it should be about fairness.
Fairness, absolutely. Now, here's a look at today's markets. The TSX was up 15 points on the day to finish at 20,720. The Dow was up 38 points to 34,128. The S&P 500 was up 11 on the day to 4147, and the Nasdaq was up 110 points to 12,070. West Texas Intermediate Oil was down 54 cents to $78.52 US per barrel. Natural gas was down 9 cents to $2.47 US. Gold was down $18.20 on the day to $18.35.95 US an ounce, and silver was up a cent to $21.63 US an ounce. Feed wheat is at $12 per bushel, barley's at $9.08, canola's at $18.66, and corn is at $11.23 per bushel. Live cattle were up 40 cents to $162.55. Feeder cattle March contract was up 68 cents to $187.33, and lean hogs April contract was down 75 cents to $86.50. The Canadian dollar was up slightly over the past 24 hours to $74.68 US. We have some breaking news for you this hour. RCMP Commissioner Brenda Lucki is stepping down next month. Alberta Justice Minister Tyler Shandro blasted Lucki in a response to the federal government's decision to invoke the Emergencies Act during the Freedom Convoy last year. Lucki said it was her personal decision to step down. Her last day is March the 17th. More information has come to light regarding the $6,000 a night hotel stay a government official stayed at during the Queen's funeral in London. Political reporter Brian Lilly has the details for us next. Listen, if you see news happening in your community, be sure to drop us an email at info@bridgecitynews.ca. We'd love to hear from you. A little while ago, we chatted about Prime Minister Justin Trudeau's hotel expenses in London during the Queen's funeral. Stories were circulating of a $6,000 per night room with butler service. Well, now more information has come to light about that trip. To talk about it in more detail is our political reporter and Toronto Sun columnist Brian Lilly, who joins us once again from Toronto. So, Brian, what have you learned?
We learned that that story sent the government into a bit of a tizzy. They didn't know how to respond. They didn't know what to say. I did an access to information request on communications within the days after the story broke. And we saw, because if you remember back, I was asking for days for a response from Global Affairs Canada because PMO wouldn't tell us anything. PMO said, talk to GAC. GAC didn't respond, we found out, because they felt PMO had answered. They never answered who stayed in the $6,000 a night hotel room. We got redacted documents back on that. We saw lines drafted to respond to my questions, and then an order from the minister's office not to respond to me at all. That was part of it, but also discussion among senior civil servants at Global Affairs of what does this mean for the coronation of King Charles this coming May? And should we reduce numbers was part of this discussion. They decided not to, but it does look like the Prime Minister and the Governor General will be in separate hotel rooms to make the overall bill smaller and to not make it look quite as opulent. So it'll be interesting to see where they go. Look, they have to go to these events. Nobody's saying they don't, but a $6,000 a night, 3-bedroom suite with butler just for the Prime Minister, that makes no sense at all. You could have stayed in all kinds of beautiful hotel suites for far less than what the Prime Minister paid for that one. And I'm assuming, even though they won't tell us, I am assuming that it is the Prime Minister because that's the only place that hasn't answered clearly on were they there.
And it appears as though the Canadian Taxpayers Federation is also getting in on the act, and they're looking for answers too.
Yeah, so they're saying they're going to launch legal action because they submitted their own access to information request, and they got back documents showing that the government has the answer of who stayed in that room, but they won't release it. And it's an abuse of the situation. And I'm experiencing that, Hal, with other hotel documents that I received. So after the Prime Minister left the Queen's funeral, he flew to New York, he went to the United Nations General Assembly. We wanted the hotel expenses. They redacted the name, the address, any identifying features that could tell you what the hotel room, what the hotel was. They even redacted how many rooms were booked. So we get a total cost. We know that there were executive suites, junior suites. There were rooms that were booked for storage of equipment and furniture. That's all fine. It's part of the cost of traveling with a large entourage. But, we don't know an awful lot of other details. And the government's claiming security. I'm sorry, it's not security either on this one or the one that where they stayed for the Queen's funeral. The event's already happened. It's in the past. There is no security aspect to this. So the government is just embarrassed at the $6,000 a night hotel room, which, by the way, if you use the real exchange rate, is more than $7,000 a night for 5 nights. Wow. They're embarrassed by this story, and they're starting to block the release of information that you and I as taxpayers have the right to know.
So much for government transparency. Brian, let's talk about the Premier's recent meeting with Prime Minister Justin Trudeau discussing an increase in healthcare funding. The 10-year offer is on the table. Will the Premiers accept? Do you think maybe there will be some counter-offers?
They're going to accept, and we've known that from the beginning. there is an attempt led by Ontario Premier Doug Ford to try and get some language added that will, as Ford said in a recent news conference, just assure the premiers that there's not going to be a fiscal cliff that they fall off of. Some of the pots of money were set up, it's a 10-year deal, but some of the pots are for 4 years, some are for 5, but they're for programs that are supposed to continue on, such as, I'll give you an example. The federal government wants to put forward money so that every province and territory can increase the hourly wage of personal support workers. Okay, well, that's great. But if you're only going to fund that for 5 years, what happens in year 6? That's what the premiers want to know. They know they're not going to get blood out of a stone from the federal government. They're not going to get the 35% funding, the $28 billion extra. They're going to get this. Part of the reason they're going to take it is, how do you turn around and say to the electorate, I turned down more money for healthcare? Say Premier Danielle Smith, she's got an election in May. She cannot, she can complain and say the federal government needs to do more, but she can't turn down this money and then go into an election against Rachel Notley, who'll be saying, you got offered money for healthcare and you said no.
Yeah, May 29th is a pretty big day here in the province. Brian, the Ethics Commissioner has called for senior Liberals to receive some ethics training after yet another Liberal was found in breach of the Act. Tell me more.
Yeah, I think this is number 9. We're talking about Greg Fergus. He's a Liberal MP from the Quebec side of the Ottawa River, so Gatineau, Elmer area. He lobbied on behalf of a TV station to the CRTC. He went above and beyond what he's supposed to do as an MP. So he was found in violation. And, that just came this week at a time when, and Greg Fergus is a parliamentary secretary, but Mary Ng, who's the Minister for International Trade, is currently under fire for her violation of the Ethics Act, where she gave contracts to a friend, very cozy contracts. And you know how, at first I wasn't overly exercised by this. A Liberal hiring a Liberal to do communications work, yeah, they're not going to hire a Conservative to consult them on how to communicate with the public. But then I saw some of the testimony, and in particular, the interrogation by Conservative MP Michael Barrett of Minister Ng, where he just walked through with very firm but simple questions of who was on this training? What did the training consist of? Were there presentations made, slide decks, even asked if there were laminates put on an overhead projector, for those of you old enough to remember that technology. None of that was there. The couple of pages of paper that were submitted on here's what we'll do on training, but it was $17,000 just about for 2 Zoom calls with Minister Ng's best friend. I mean, they've been friends for 20 years. They talk all the time. This is an egregious abuse of taxpayer money. And Ng didn't recuse herself from making the decision. So sole sourced to her friend. I can't tell what the work was, but I can tell you that that is exactly what we did see, is exactly the type of work that political staffers normally do. Ng has 4 political communications staff plus 100 bureaucrats working in her department that could have done this work for her.
And I can tell you right now, the Zoom call is not costing us 17 grand, so thanks for that. I appreciate that. Brian, we recently spoke about Roxham Road and how officials in New York City are allegedly busing people up to the Canadian border. Now, apparently, Quebec is busing people to Ontario. What's going on here?
Premier Francois Legault says his province is full. He can't take any more people. Over this past weekend, there were 380 people between Saturday and Sunday who crossed the border. Think about that. In December, it was an average of 151 people per day. 380 over 2 days, Hal. That's far bigger. Guess what? Only 8 of them stayed in Quebec, according to the Quebec government. They told the feds 2 things. 1, you've got to talk to New York and tell them to stop. Premier Legault also wrote a letter to New York Mayor Eric Adams telling him that this was unacceptable and he needs to stop. But Legault also told the Prime Minister and the federal government, you need to deal with this. 1, we need to send people to other provinces. So last time this was a big issue, a lot of people came to Ontario, others went to New Brunswick. Expect to see that continue to climb. We haven't heard from the Ontario government on this yet, but we expect to. But he's also pressuring the federal government to stop this, to discourage this. This is not regular immigration. This is not regular refugee flow. These are people being shuffled around either due to the American problems or they fly into JFK directly from around the world, immediately get on a bus, head to Plattsburgh, and then get in a cab to Roxham Road. This is people being used and abused with the promise that this will work. Most of the claims are rejected. We need to discourage this. We need to stop it.
U.S. President Joe Biden's recent State of the Union address appeared quite protectionist in tone. How much does that mindset, Brian, really threaten Canadian jobs and industry? I mean, keeping in mind Donald Trump appeared to have a very similar tone when he was president.
If Donald Trump was more protectionist than Obama, and Obama was more protectionist than George W. Bush, Biden's more protectionist than all of them. And it threatens everything from softwood lumber in British Columbia and Quebec to meat producers, be it pork in Quebec or cattle in Alberta. It threatens the auto industry. It threatens manufacturing, steel, because he wants everything in American infrastructure projects to be made in America. This really needs to be dealt with. It needs to be tackled. And the Trudeau government has fallen asleep. They were all hands on deck during the Trump years. They need to get back to that. They need to be on an aggressive footing, because while Sleepy Joe does it with a smile, he is more protectionist than all the other presidents.
Brian, let's talk about balloons now for a minute, in particular Chinese spy balloons and some unidentified flying objects that have been shot down over North America. Does Ottawa really have a good handle on what's going on here?
No, but at least Defense Minister Anita Anand was willing to say she didn't think they were extraterrestrial. An American general caused quite a stir by saying, "I haven't ruled anything out," and everyone said, "Oh, so they're aliens." They didn't tell us about the first balloon until it was already in the United States. The second balloon was shot down before it got to our airspace. It was shot down over Alaska. The third one, it was flying so low that it was a danger if commercial aircraft were in the area. It was at about 40,000 feet. That's getting into the commercial aircraft range. So no, I don't think they've got a handle on it. We ended up with one shot over Lake Huron, closer to the Michigan side, but near the Canadian border. And I'm going to bet that at some point that balloon was in Canadian airspace. So NORAD is missing some of these. Politically, this is causing a great strain between both Ottawa and Washington and Beijing. A lot of accusations going back and forth. I spoke to a gentleman who is a China analyst named Bill Bishop, and he said he has never seen the relationship between Washington and Beijing so strained. That this is China flexing its muscle but denying it's doing so. Now you've got Taiwan saying that they're going to shoot down anything that floats over their territory. This has the potential to really ratchet up tensions, put us in a dangerous position. If these are coming from the Chinese government or being allowed to happen, China says they're from a private company and they're weather balloons. I don't believe that. But if it's from a private company, they're allowing it to happen. They need to stop. They need to tone things down.
Brian, the final report from the Emergencies Act inquiry will be released next Monday, but it will come on a day that neither the House of Commons nor the Senate are sitting. Will the public or Canadians in general still get a chance to see Justice Rouleau's report?
It's an odd day for it to be released. It's a holiday here in Ontario. It's Family Day. It's a holiday in various provinces depending on where you live.
Alberta as well, yeah, you bet.
But the House is not sitting, and the House and the Senate both reside in Ontario. I'm told that the report will still be released. It will still be made public. I'm not sure how. It's a provincial holiday, but federal workers still always take it, from my memory of my many years in Ottawa. So we're expected to see it. If you recall, originally the order in council setting this up said you will give it to Cabinet on February 6th, and you will deliver it to both houses of Parliament on February 20th. So that was going to give the government a 2-week head start. That didn't happen, thankfully. There was a lot of pressure, a lot of outrage over that, giving the government 2 weeks to bring up their spin, lobby to change things. I don't think that would have happened, but of course there would have been the assumption that was going on. Justice Rouleau said, I need until the 20th before you can get anything. The government agreed and then announced that it would be released to the government and the public at the same time. I'll expect the government to have it for a few hours before it's released. They'll flip through it, but I'm expecting that we will all get to see it on Monday, and that even though Monday is a holiday, that I'll be working, writing about this.
Yeah, looking forward to seeing the results of this report. Political reporter and Toronto Sun columnist Brian Lilly, thanks so much for joining us today.
Thank you, Hal.
Physical fitness is a goal for many of us, yet it can seem hard to stay dedicated and motivated while on the quest. At times, it can even be a challenge to see the results so many of us want to see from our time at the gym. That desire for fitness can be like the personal version of the hero's journey we see in so many movies and other stories. But joining me today is a friend and fitness trainer to talk about succeeding at our own quest to become a fitter and stronger version of ourselves. Gavin Johnson is a personal trainer and a fixture at the Gym of the North here in Lethbridge. Gavin, welcome to Bridge City News.
How are you doing?
Great. Glad to have you on. I got to ask you, I would think that staying motivated at the gym is probably the #1 hurdle to overcome. What tips can you recommend for maintaining that motivation that we need?
Absolutely. Yeah, I see that time and time again. It's usually the hardest thing to overcome is just staying motivated. A few things you can do is just kind of changing the words for yourself too, is starting to find something that's a little more disciplined in your daily routine and stuff like that. A couple big things that you can do is find a gym partner. Anyone in your area that wants to go or is already going to the gym, go with them, go alongside them, or start this journey with a friend, family member, significant other. You can do things like hiring a personal trainer and a coach if you have the money to be able to do that kind of thing, for sure. That's a huge accountability partner in that sense. And then everything else that you can do to stay motivated is track your progress. You can do things like taking your weights and measurements and stuff, but the #1 way to do it is take pictures. If you have some sort of physique related goal with going to the gym, definitely track your progress over time. Take pictures. You don't have to show anyone. Even if you hire a coach, we don't all require to see your pictures. Take some pictures so you can see, after you've been going consistently for 8 weeks, some difference in yourself that way too.
Right. So I got to ask you, what about tips for somebody, because you're talking about writing down, maybe actually making a fitness routine in like a journal or a scrapbook or something?
Absolutely. Yeah, and that's another thing too, is tracking your progress in a sense like that. Write down what you've done. Look at weights you've lifted over time, journal the experience, even going home and debriefing on a session. Hey, today went awesome. Had a new PR on my squat, had a really good conversation with a friend at the gym today, felt very motivated, excelled at my intended things to do at the gym. And then, like you said, the other thing is too, is have some sort of routine when you're going. Don't just go free ball it and wing it. You can go online and search exercise program and 1,000 come up, and just try one of them. Or like I said, that's where you can branch into going farther and hiring someone too.
Yeah, and I know sometimes we can maybe put too much pressure on ourselves. So what would you say is a first place to start? You mentioned the Gym Buddy, and a program, but is there something else that you would say this is the primary place to get your foot in the door?
Yeah, I mean, like the place you want to start is just by simply showing up. Just come inside. Another thing you can do is just come to the gym. Like I said, having a gym partner is huge, but even if you just leave work and show up in front of the doors, and you don't even have to come in, just starting to set yourself with that routine that way too. Vibes.
Yeah, no, that's perfect. And I suppose for some, the cost might be a little bit of a prohibiting factor, especially if you want to get into that coaching and training side. But can you put into words maybe the benefits of a physical fitness program in terms of payoff being greater than, let's say, your gym membership is, I don't know, 10 Happy Meals or something like that?
Yeah, so and on that front, there's a lot of benefits to hiring someone. They know what they're doing. That's is simply put, right? They've spent their time and their own money doing this kind of thing. So, like, if you've got that availability to be able to invest into it, I highly recommend it. Like I said, we've poured our time, effort, our own personal finances into doing this, continuing with our education. We've went to school, all that kind of stuff too. So huge benefits that way. Kind of saves you that point of guess and check. You get over that hurdle without having to guess for months and months on end and wonder if you're making progress too. So very much trained eye.
That's perfect. I think a perfect way to look at it. Let's say that I was bringing in a friend or a family member to see you at the gym, and they were total novice. Where would you start them out? Maybe is there a machine or something? What it would be that first exercise that we would start my friend with?
So I usually start off by just a couple of questions, finding out if you have any injuries and limitations. And let's just say on this sense, there's none. Lots of this kind of stuff, it always depends, but most of the time I'm going to start you in some kind of machine somewhere in the gym. I want to get an idea of how you move. I'm going to throw you on a piece of cardio equipment for a few minutes, get you moving, get talking to you, get to know you a little bit. This is assuming we've had a consultation already in the past to come in and BS a little bit as well. But then we're going to move into the gym and we're going to start playing around with stuff. I'm going to probably start off by asking if you've used anything in the gym. If there's something you've been on, we're immediately going to go to that. You're going to have some sort of comfort. You've been on this machine, you've moved with it. We're going to fix your form and everything else and then move on from there. And I usually, 9 times out of 10, I start off with all machines. This is going to teach you how to move with proper biomechanics and stuff that way as well. You're not just guessing. There's a lot of what's called external stabilization. That machine is holding you in place. If you're using a chest press, you can't manipulate how them handles are moving around. They move in one direction only, right? So that's usually where I'll start, is finding some machines you've used or comfortable with. And if there's nothing, I'll start us off on the easiest possible machine we can start with that way too.
Yeah, that makes sense. And that's really important that people manage their own expectations. And one of the reasons why probably going with a friend or getting a coach is really helpful to get into it. And I know for me that physical fitness can be like mind over mattress, so to speak, of just getting up and doing it, getting your foot in the door. And it sounds like we talked about journaling, so goal setting is probably a key factor here. Can you talk about the use of goals, maybe in helping set your clients up to succeed?
Yeah, so there's lots with goals. To break it down is find out what you want to do and why you're there. That's always step number 1. Like, have an idea in mind. If you're going to the gym for mental well-being, having more energy, that's one thing, but you can also have like the physique related stuff where you want to lose weight, build muscle for confidence, anything like that. I think a big point to touch on when setting goals is talk to a professional that have seen people in your exact shoes. We've seen people going through the same process, similar to yourself. Tell us your goals. Tell us what you're wanting to achieve. And then from there, we can kind of guide you along that path too. But just find where your passion lays and what you want to do. Sometimes, like I said, it's just physique related. But sometimes it could even be like setting routine and trying to become more in depth with doing different things. That can correlate over to business, to personal life, to work life, everything in that front too. So just find what you want to do, and just kind of move forward from there. Talk to people, express your goals with people. Another thing is to write that goal down. You can write it down so every morning you see it. One thing I've had clients do in the past, write a goal down, put it on your door. And if you close your door at night, every day when you wake up and you leave, it sounds simple and dumb, but you have to read through that. It's an immediate reminder of what you're trying to do and how you can go about achieving that goal is its own scenario, but that first step has been made. There's something you want to do that way. So
yeah, exactly. Well, that writing that vision down and making it plain, that statement is even in the Bible. So it's an idea as old as time itself. Put it on a piece of paper, put it on your mirror in your bathroom or your door before you go out to work, and you're seeing that. So let's say, for an example, practical example, you and I actually talked about this last week. Somebody who comes in and says, Gavin, I need to do a pull-up. That's what I've written down on my sheet of paper. Please help me. What is the plan that you would suggest for his success or her success?
So the number one thing, we're going to go directly in with a pull-up here. Regress to progress, right? So find out where you are in that pull-up and go backwards. If you can't even hang from the bar, first thing, you have to improve that grip strength to be able to hang from the bar. The next step, if you're not strong enough to pull yourself up in any way, shape, or form, find a way that you can. You don't even have to start with doing any sort of that actual work, like just going through the motion of learning how to pull yourself up to a bar. Okay, that step has been made. Now move on to a cable system where you can grab a wide bar, mimic that movement, start moving through it, get stronger in that movement pattern. Then from there, take your more direct steps of moving into something like an assisted pull-up machine where it's going to take body weight off for you, but now you're doing a direct pull-up. You're pulling yourself up to that bar. And then same thing, take another step from there, grab a band, start doing that pull-up on an actual bar. And then before you know it, it might take you 3 years to get there, but staying consistent and regressing as far as you have to before you just start trying to do it, then boom, all of a sudden, just like that, you're doing a couple pull-ups in a row. So I think that's a big one, is just looking at where you currently stand in your goal and what obstacles are between you and achieving that goal. The biggest thing being, like I said, regress all the way backwards, find a starting point, and then just move on from there.
Right.
So,
and folks at home, this is why you need a gym buddy or a helper. So if somebody, Gavin, wants to hire a coach at the gym, there must be a checklist or some criteria that people need to think about selecting that coach. What do they look for?
so there's a lot. I think the first thing you're going to want to ask yourself, do you connect with that person? Can you sit down and have a conversation, be open with them? Like very commonly, they can be an amazing coach, but you can't sit and have a 5-minute conversation and express your goals. There's no way you guys are gonna work together. That coach, if they're a good coach and good at what they do, they will refer you to someone. Most commonly being is just trying to find someone that you can work with. Then the next step from there is get to know them a little bit. What is their experience in the industry? Do they walk the walk? That's a big one to ask yourself. Is this coach just someone that's going to give me a plan and tell me what to do? Or do they have experience working with people and want to actually educate me to my goal? I think that's a big one that people got to look for is a coach just giving you a plan, or are they trying to teach you how to succeed over time? Because the ultimate goal, myself being a coach and trainer, is I don't want to work with someone for years on end. I want to be able to teach you enough information so that you can move into some point to being able to be autonomous with it. Don't get me wrong. I love working with people for a very long period of time, especially if it's sport related. But that's a big thing. And then, do they have success in the industry? Ask them, have they worked with people in your situation? If they say no, ask them deeper questions of what do you think they would need to do? Just start to get to know them and see if their ideals fit your needs yourself. And another thing to remember is just because this is what they do as a profession doesn't always mean it's going to be the right fit. Like I said, we're going to circle back to number one. Can you connect with that person on a personal level? If that answer is yes, same thing. Start asking more questions, get to know them, and move on from there.
Right.
So
that's great. I appreciate that input. And I asked that question because not everybody would think I should do a little bit of a deep dive into my connection with this person, right? Let's move on to the benefits on our mental health and wellness that going to the gym provides for us. I know I was reading in some research for this just about the happy molecules that come from when our muscles are contracted, and we could talk for hours on that, I'm sure. But I know for myself, I like to say my 12-step program is actually a stair climber. But I got to ask you, talk to us about what you have seen as the positive changes to mindset and increased mental wellness from going to the gym.
You know, this is probably the biggest thing I see. So when you're going into the gym, usually people are coming in physique related. What they're not going to realize is the amount of mental health benefits you're going to get from this. Biggest one being routine outside of the gym. If you can get into that routine of making it to the gym, taking that step in, all of a sudden that's going to start to correlate into the rest of your life. Like I had mentioned before, you're going to get better personal life. Your work life is going to increase. And these aren't even going to be things that you're trying to work on. Just having that mental clarity is huge. All of a sudden, you're getting out of bed 10 minutes earlier, and then all of a sudden you want to start diving into your nutrition. Don't do all these at the same time, but simply getting into the door and increasing that mental health by just lifting weight is huge. Another thing is too, is if naturally you're kind of aggressive, getting in here and moving things around and taking it out in this place to move on to the rest of your life is huge. It's like taking a weight off your shoulder. And I see it time and time and time again that it has a direct correlation to the rest of your life. Business starts to succeed more. You start to have a better relationship with your significant other. You want to play with your kids. You want to move around with the grandkids. Anything like that. Like there's so much more than just coming here and working out.
It really is true. That exercise routine, I know we were talking about physically going to a gym. That's just a great thing for accountability and gaining relationships with like-minded people. But you're right, it has a snowball effect, a positive effect on every part of our life. And Gavin, unfortunately, that's all the time we have for today. I really appreciate you joining us.
Absolutely. Thank you very much for having me on today.
Yeah, it was my pleasure. And I'm Michael Clausen for all of us here at Bridge City News. Thanks for watching.